Next, from Carbondale, we sit down with Randy Dunn, president of Southern Illinois University. We talk to President Dunn about the effects the state's budget problems are having on the funding of the Southern Illinois University system and the important role the SIU system has in employing many Southern Illinoisans. This runs about 25 minutes.
President Randy Dunn, thanks for joining us on the Illinois Channel.
Glad to be back with you.
Everyone knows that the state right now is awaiting the budget to be passed. Parts of the budget are passed, but not the part that funds higher education. And here we are on the cusp of starting a new fiscal year. Where does it put a university like Southern Illinois University?
Well, in one sense, it's creating a number of difficulties for us, and I'll talk about that in a moment. In terms of cash flow, we're all right for the time being. In fact, there had been some discussion with all of the state universities looking at cash position and the ability to go into the start of the fall semester. And for the most part, like most of the state schools, we're okay for a while. We're going to be having tuition income coming in, fees getting paid, and that's going to allow us the ability to manage operations going into the fall semester. The difficulty is we can't do that forever. If you look just at SIU as a system, we're about a $900 million operation. The operations budget for all of the system is in that neighborhood. When roughly $200 million comes from the state, there's only so much finagling you can do to keep things going. But for the near future, we'll be all right. The challenges come, though, in terms of other areas. So while the cash flow will be there to get school opened and have our employees paid, the challenges we have come in looking at what we do for the future. For instance, we hire hundreds of graduate students at the university. They help us do the research work we contract for. They teach hundreds of sections of courses to undergraduates. And we normally would contract with those students for the academic term, for the 2015-16 school year. Well, what we've had to do, given the uncertainty, is hold back on those contracts, and we've only done fall semester only contracts for those individuals. Same thing with the group of employees we call our non-tenure track faculty. Sometimes you'll hear these people referred to as adjunct instructors, but for us, we have, again, hundreds of folks who work for us on up to a full-time basis. They're not engaged in research, they're not working on the tenure track, but they're critical to teaching the thousands of students at all of our campuses. We've held off as long as we could in contracting with those individuals. They're year-to-year employees. So we've held off as long as we could in contracting with those individuals, not knowing what the budget picture would be. But we can't hold off any longer. So literally just this week as we're taping, I've given the okay to go ahead and contract with those folks because we have classes that need instructors, and we've committed to those people, those faculty members, for the academic term, not knowing whether we're going to have state money to pay for them as we get into the year. But we have to operate the campuses given where we are now. So those types of things create a planning challenge for us. Another area of difficulty comes in the state grants and contracts we manage. We have, just as we tape here at Carbondale today, at the SIU Carbondale campus, about $20 million in state grants that we have undertaken, again, for the state of Illinois. These employ hundreds of individuals, whether they be civil service, administrative professional staff, graduate assistants who I mentioned earlier, and certainly faculty members. With the state budget impasse, all of those grants have been suspended. We're not receiving funding for those except in rare cases where, for instance, a court order or a consent decree maybe has forced the payment of those funds. As an example, our School of Social Work here in Carbondale has a multi-million-dollar grant with DCFS to train foster parents. Well, the consent decree that kept DCFS funding going benefits us so that we can get that grant money. But on the whole, we're now continuing grant operations. We're doing work for the state of Illinois, but we're not seeing any funding for that. So in essence, we're floating the loan to the state to continue that work and to keep our people employed. Not sure when we're going to see those funds, or depending on how this budget comes out, if those grant programs will be continued. Even in areas where there shouldn't be a question, such as federal programs, we have about $5 million of what we call federal pass-through or federal flow-through grants that we receive. That is to say, it's federal money, it comes through the state, and then goes to our researchers and project directors all over SIU.
It might be like the National Institute of Health or something.
One good example, there are a number of these types of things, where we know the federal money's there, the work needs to be done, we need to keep doing this research. For instance, one of these federal grants has to do with a wildlife program, and we need to be going out in the field, paying people to track wildlife and do all the work that goes on with this grant. And we know that the money's there because it's coming to us from the feds, but because there's been no state appropriation of that federal money, we're not getting paid for that either. So we're
it has
carrying,
to be, it's supposed to be a state match of some sort?
well, there may be a state match, but all of those federal dollars have to get appropriated from the state because they're this federal pass-through. That's all frozen too now. So we have a huge swath of operations that we're carrying on behalf of the state with no money to pay for it, and certainly no guarantee that the funding will be there, particularly on the state-only dollars, once this impasse is done. So while on the whole, the operations of the SIU campuses will continue, will be open for business, our programs are ongoing, students won't notice things different when they come to school in big ways, with some cash flow to continue that into the fall. We're starting to feel the hurt of that right now in a number of areas, and what we are concerned about is, depending on where this impasse comes out and how it resolves, we're losing our flexibility to make adjustments within this fiscal year, depending on what would happen, because we're having to make obligations and encumber funds right now to have the university move forward for this coming term.
Have you had any discussions with your lawmakers as far as going to the governor, or have you called the governor's office yourself on some of these grants and said, hey, couldn't you release the federal money?
Right now we are focusing on that, and in fact there's been some testimony and awareness of this that's gone on, so we're hopeful that maybe we can make some progress in that area. But again, as we're starting to see, this may be a set of a bunch of specialized appropriations now that start to take place to get this money freed up until this stalemate gets settled. And that may be one approach. But in answer to your bigger question there, yes, I think it's fair to say that what we would call our SIU delegation understands full well the challenges that we're facing. We've had Governor Rauner down here on campus. In fact, he spoke at the Carbondale campus for commencement this past spring. We've had good opportunity to speak with the Secretary of Education in the governor's cabinet. So I think there's awareness generally of these issues, but at this point, some of the fixes that could take place to provide some relief just haven't come to the fore yet. But part of my job and others here in the leadership of the institution is to make sure we're getting that information known and getting the word out. But at this point, an impasse is an impasse, and haven't seen a lot of movement.
I want to remind people just briefly, how big is SIU in terms of, you said about $900 million thereabouts budget?
Operating budget for the entire system. So,
and how many campuses?
Well, you can count this many ways. People know us as having primarily three main campuses. The Carbondale campus, the oldest campus within the system, the Edwardsville campus, as well as our School of Medicine in Springfield. So here in Carbondale, where we're taping today, about 18,000 students. We're looking in anticipation of fall numbers, probably around 14,000 or so at the Edwardsville campus. Carbondale's within the sector of institutions nationally known as research universities. Edwardsville is what's known as a regional or comprehensive campus, not as much research work, not as many doctoral programs, and then of course the School of Medicine in Springfield is a health campus. But we also have sizable operations in many other areas. For instance, our School of Dental Medicine, which is a unit from SIU Edwardsville, they actually have a separate standalone campus in Alton, Illinois. We run a very important and viable higher education center in East St. Louis that's actually an outgrowth of some Edwardsville operations, but also has aspects of Carbondale involved there too. If you think about the School of Medicine, we have family practice clinics and residencies all throughout central and southern Illinois. So in the grand scheme of things, we're a big operation. We're a major
player.
player.
In fact, I think you're the major employer, I believe, in Southern Illinois.
Well, after Scott Air Force Base, we are number one or number two, depending on how you want to count things. Those that say Scott's number one typically count all the enlisted personnel at that base. But clearly in central and southern Illinois, we are a major player and have, because of that, a great impact on the local and regional economy. In fact, one of the things that we talked about this spring as we were doing our own budget testimony has to do with the impact of the cuts that were proposed in Governor Rauner's budget for just SIU. Of course, when Governor Rauner delivered his budget address back in February, he proposed about a 31.5% cut in state support to all of the state universities. That would have hit SIU in total at about $60 million, all campuses, all purposes. If you take a generally accepted number that says local dollars will turn over or churn about 7 times in the local and regional economy, and we've actually done a couple of economic impact statements here at SIU, one out of Edwardsville, one out of Carbondale, and both pretty recent, so we feel fairly confident about those numbers. If you accept that a local dollar spent by SIU turns over around 7 times, that proposed $60 million in reduction to our budget from state support would have meant a $500 million hit to the central and southern Illinois economy. So that gives some sense of the magnitude of our operations and the impact that we carry. Again, we're not a University of Illinois. The magnitude there is even larger and more expansive, but it does give some taste of what we mean to the economies of this part of the state.
Although it may be argued conceivably, and not to ding the University of Illinois, but that their percentage of state funding of their total budget is less than yours.
Yes.
So a cut on them, while would be more in dollars, would be less significant in terms of their budget.
It is, and being a degree holder from our great institution, the University of Illinois, there is some truth in what you're saying. So while it's more dollars that they receive from the state, it is a somewhat smaller percentage, and there is the ability in a university like Illinois to spread that loss over a larger set of operations. So for instance, if you just think about the grants and contracts budget solely, not the operating budget for Illinois, but just the grants and contracts they do across all the U of I, that probably comes close to our system's operating budget. That's the difference in magnitude. So they do have the ability to cover costs in some more areas than even we do here at SIU.
Well, your $900 million operating budget, I believe theirs, I'm going to take the university hospital out.
Yes.
If you take the hospital out, their operating budget is about $4 billion
Yes,
compared
and
to your $900 million.
That's right. So you get a sense of the difference in scope there. But I can tell you, Terry, that where we're seeing a real challenge here in the state of Illinois around higher education, would be our regional institutions that, for instance, don't have a number of professional schools attached to them. They don't have a lot of doctoral programming. They're not doing as much work in grants and contracts. And right now, as I talk to other presidents and chancellors, I do sense that it's getting to be some very difficult times for them. So while it's my belief that every school is going to be able to operate normally going into fall, open on time, keep employees paid, we're going to see some state institutions that before we get too far into the fall semester are going to get put in a real vice about keeping their operations going. We'll see how that plays out, and maybe that creates some brink to move the stalemate on both sides. But while I say everyone's okay for now, we can't keep this up forever, and I think especially some of the regional institutions are going to start feeling that pinch pretty soon.
And I would point out, because we get people watching this throughout the state, and so
Yes.
people in Chicago may not understand or may need to be reminded that, I mean, the thing is, we have, as you say, nearly $500 million economic impact of the university. And this is in a region of the state that is traditionally has a higher unemployment
Yes.
level. There's less economic opportunity
Yes.
down here. So when you start pulling out the underpinnings of the university here,
Yes.
the impact, the ripple effect across this region of Illinois is more pronounced, I think, than it might be in other areas.
And I would agree with that. So if you look at any list, whether it's the top 10 or 12 or 15 counties where unemployment's highest in Illinois, you would typically see counties within the footprint of SIU making up about 3/4 of that list. And what that means is that we have an obligation at SIU to reach out and provide some of those regional supports and programs and services to help increase quality of life within our footprint, within these areas that we serve. And what worries me about the proposals for state support going forward is that we're going to lose the opportunity to do some of that very important work. As we've talked about on the campuses, our core mission has to be moving students through degree programs, getting them graduated and matriculating into the workforce as successful employees and productive citizens, and that's still job one for us as a university. But we take on much other work, particularly when you're a system of multiple universities covering a huge swath of territory in the state of Illinois. The regional support work that we do is vital to the well-being of many people in central and southern Illinois, and what I'm concerned about is that we start losing the ability to take on that role in cities and towns and counties where our help is needed, whether it's in terms of helping disadvantaged high schools, helping their students become college ready, whether it's in the provision of healthcare services through our School of Medicine. We do a tremendous amount of work in rural hospitals and with a telehealth initiative. We were just able at the School of Dental Medicine in Alton to start taking adult Medicaid patients. And after a year of getting that started, now we're seeing the budget turn again, and we may have to get out of that adult Medicaid business for dental medicine. These things have a tremendous impact on quality of life for the people that we're intending to serve, and that's what worries me. SIU has a long historic tradition of being tied to its place. And with all that's going on, I worry that we have a more and more difficult time fulfilling that mission.
There's a lot of other things I wish we had time to talk about.
I understand.
Before we close out, because we've talked about the difficulties at this point in time. On the other hand, there's going to be moms and dads looking to send their kid to a college. There's
Yes.
going to be children in high school now, or kids in high school, who might be in their sophomore or junior year. So let's let you have a plug for the good things about SIU. Why, if they're watching this, why should any high school kid consider doing their degree program at SIU?
Well, if I tie back to what we talked about at the beginning, The universities are operating fully open for business, doing all of the great things we've always done, and the programs and academic services for students are there and going as strong as they ever have. If you look at our pricing within both that national research sector, which is SIU Carbondale, as well as the regional or comprehensive sector, which is Edwardsville, our tuition and fee pricing combined is still the lowest within those sectors. So again, if you think about SIU Carbondale, the other state schools in that research sector would be Illinois State, Northern Illinois, Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and UIC. We're the lowest priced among that group and offer a full range of programs. Same thing holds true at Edwardsville. We have great opportunities for student leadership and growth because we're not as large as some of those other institutions. There's a level of engagement with faculty and staff that provides opportunities for students. We've just engaged in some big efforts to increase scholarship support for our students, particularly here at the Carbondale campus. All of the things that parents and students are looking for in a great education that is done in a reasonably priced way, you can find at SIU. And we tell all of our students who we're recruiting, along with their families, come down to our campuses, look at what we're doing, see the strength and vitality of what goes on. And particularly at Carbondale, if we can get those families to make those trips and they see what we do, we get them here. We get them enrolled as students at SIU, both at Edwardsville and Carbondale. Sometimes it's convincing that kid in Rockford or up in the Quad Cities area or Quincy to make that trip down to see all that we have to offer at SIU. If they're willing to do that, the places sell themselves. But the challenge we have is through all this is not to start carving away all of these things that make us great universities. And the challenge exists for us to keep strong in doing what we're doing during these times that are going to be pretty tough to navigate. If we can do that, we'll come out on the other end an even stronger institution, as well as one I think that's more efficient and leaner and streamlined in its operations. I certainly don't begrudge the governor and so many who have recognized that Illinois cannot continue down the same path that it's been going. It is time to address these structural challenges and difficulties within our state. I would caution everyone, though, to understand it can't all be done on the backs of our great state universities. We have to be a partner and a player in it, but we can't carry the whole load in this process. So we're looking forward to continued conversations and engaging in discussions about how we can play a role in solving our state's crises, but at the same time ensuring that we remain strong institutions for the citizens of Illinois into the future.
Okay, SIU President Randy Dunn, we appreciate you joining us on the Illinois Channel.
Absolutely.
Thank you.